I'm recording. Let me pull up my screen real quick so I can share that, and we'll go from there. Give me 1 second. Okay. And let me make this full screen. And can you all see this? Yeah. If you need me to stop, if you need me to slow down, don't hesitate to interrupt me or just call out like, yo, can you slow up or repeat that? I have no problem. I'm not able to see you all like I normally can. All right. So this is going to be important. Normally, I spend more conversation and more time around these theoretical frameworks because I have multiple theoretical frameworks in the course. But for this class, we only have one. And the theoretical framework is the African American male theory. So what I'm going to look for you all to do is to work your answers through this theory, right? So at some way, your answer should address African American boys and men being self-determined and having an unlimited capacity for morality and intelligence. And so at this level, you should be engaging this theory as it pertains to answering your questions. And I'll give you an example to help it make a little bit more sense, right? But AAMT, or African American male theory, posits that African American boys and men are resilient and resistant. AAMT posits that African American boys and men are born with an innate desire for self-determination and with an unlimited capacity for morality and intelligence. AAMT embraces resilience theory and vehemently opposes deficit paradigms, thinking, and practice. From this viewpoint, social and educational challenges facing this group stem from socially constructed systems rather than any innate biological or cultural deficiencies. Okay, so that is the theory. So all your questions should work through this theory. So for example, we're asking the question, how old are African people? Why is this information significant for understanding history? Name 2 significant African individuals and their contributions prior to European conquest or the inception of modernity. And when we hear this term modernity, all you should think of is the time in history where Europeans conquered and kind of took over as world powers, okay? So does anybody want to provide me an answer for how old African people are? There's 3 acceptable answers. And you can just shout out, you don't have to raise your hand. No ideas for how old African people are.
It was 3.2 million years ago. I think, and then another one was 7 million years ago, and the first human ancestor was found in Africa. It was Lucy.
Mm-hmm. The other acceptable answer could be 8 million years. And then there was one other answer that I gave. Who else remembers the other answer that's a little bit more accurate than what was provided by Alexandra? She's right though, but there's another answer that's more accurate, I state.
Was it unknown?
Yes, and why unknown?
Because there was no correct or evidence found to give us an exact date, so it became unknown.
Well, more precisely, Catherine, is that the further and the deeper that they dig, the older African people get. So as information continues to come out, African people get older and older. And that's why it goes from 3.2 when they found Lucy, or what we call Abiomi. Then it will move to 7 to 8 million years by the remains they found in the Congo, in the Cameroon areas. And then again, unknown, because as they continue to dig, they continue to find more evidence of older African ancestors. So does everybody understand? Those are the 3 acceptable answers. If you're going to use unknown, you must situate your question within the reality. It's unknown because the more that they dig, older African people get. That has to be a part of that answer when you use unknown, okay? Who can name for me 2 significant African individuals and their contributions prior to European conquest or the inception of modernity? Think back to the first lecture of the semester. We didn't have a reading for that. It's just notes that I provided. I gave you a list of individuals and their contributions.
Mansa Musa.
Okay, so what's significant about Mansa Musa?
I remember he was, well, from what I can remember, I just remember like billions of dollars of wealth. He owned like 500 cities. I just remember he was like very, very rich.
Yep. The wealthiest man on the planet still to this day. His wealth amassed over $400 billion. So yes, absolutely, Alexandra. Who can provide for me one more?
I can. I hope I'm saying his name right. Imhotep.
Yes. What's significant about Imhotep?
He was the first multi-genius.
Perfect.
He was a doctor, an architect, an engineer. He built Egypt's first pyramid and is architect of the Step Pyramid.
Perfect. Thank you, Destiny. Okay, so so we have 2 individuals. We know how old African people are, but if we were to use this framework, right? African American male theory, we're going to use that to situate our answer. What that may sound like, right? What your answers may sound like if we're going to answer the question, how old are African people, et cetera, right? So African American male theory posits that African people are resistant and resilient with an innate capacity for brilliance, right? This is important because it speaks to the reality that African people being the first people on the planet, dating back unknown, because the further we dig, the older they become, right? This capacity for brilliance and this morality are embodied through individuals like Imhotep, who was the world's first multi-genius, and individuals like Mansa Musa, who amassed over $400 billion in wealth. This becomes important for understanding history because it situates African people as not only the first people, but people who are able to achieve the feats of morality and brilliance that is argued or posited by African American male theory. So you see how I'm using the theory to support my answer, right? My answer is Mansa Musa. I'm sorry, my answer is Imhotep, and I'm supporting my answer because Imhotep embodies intelligence, right? The theory argues that African people are intelligent. So Imhotep is the embodiment or the personification of the intelligence that is being articulated within the theoretical framework. Does that make sense for you all? Does anyone need me to provide further clarity on how we engage these frameworks? Because it's going to be important. I'm going to be looking for you to engage them in your answers as you continue to move through the midterm. All right. So what we'll do is we'll move through the remainder of the study guide. How I've kind of broken them up into themes based on the reading. So it's kind of like 2 readings per theme. Again, we can either answer the questions that are being posed, we could have a discussion about what's being posed, or you could ask questions of me. However you feel you need to get this information to prepare yourself, this time is yours. So the first section or the first theme is pre-colonial West African manhood and this idea of having our own theory, right? So we'll deal with the first reading, the concept of manhood, pre-colonial and pre-colonial West Africa. So 1, you should be familiar and should be able to articulate what the thesis is of the reading. What are the main arguments, right? Also should be able to talk about what is the significance of manhood being a community-owned concept. Should also be able to articulate what are the 4 prerequisites for manhood in pre-colonial West Africa, and also be able to discuss why dance was important and what did dance often symbolize, okay? Does anybody want to either A, answer the questions, B, engage in a discussion around these inquiries, or C, have questions for me? All right, so we'll move on to the next one. Now, if you notice, right, this second reading, God Bless the Child Who Has His Own, is about the framework. It is about the theoretical framework, African-American male theory, right? So you should have no problem using this theory to answer these questions, right? Because the questions are rooted in the theory itself. But you want to be a little bit more consistent and a little bit more attentive to using the theories for questions like this one and the other ones that are not dealing with the theory explicitly, okay? So for this text, what is the thesis and the aim of the text, God Bless the Child Who Has Its Own? What are the distinctions between African-American men's definition of manhood, juxtaposed to the definition posed by dominant society? Another way to think about that, what is the difference in the ways that African boys and men articulate their understanding of manhood opposed to the dominant European understandings of manhood? How does African-American male theory seek to make interventions in the endangered species paradigms applied to African-American men? So they talk about how a lot of the discourse around African-American men at the time of the article was around this idea of them being an endangered species, right? So what does the article do to create an intervention in this conversation, to create a change in this conversation, right? They're also within the article, there's a critique that the author makes of John Ogbu about the idea of acting cool, right? How does resilience theory support their critique? So one, to be able to answer this, you must know what the critique is Bush and Bush are making around the work of Ogbu, right? And then you would want to think about how resilience theory adds to their critique. Does anyone want to try to answer these questions? Does anyone have questions for me? Or does anyone want to engage in a conversation around these inquiries?
Yeah, I have a question as far as the critique of the Bush was acting cool, is like he had practiced being around white people. That's how they fight, that's how they know how to like to keep themselves calm, because they're emulating white men.
Kind of, Cherie. More so where that is. So in the article, they go into the work of John Ogbu, this Nigerian thinker who's studying Black men in Oakland. And Ogbu argues, right, that the idea of Black men acting cool is a response to being around white people, right? It's a response to white hegemonic and oppressive forces. So Ogbu says that Black boys take on the position of this demonstration of coolness to help them deal with the oppressive forces that they find in educational or in schooling settings, right? So the critique that Bush is making, and Bush is the author of the article, the critique that Bush is making is no, is not that they're responding to the oppressive forces of Western education or Western schooling. This cool posture that you're being attentive to is pervasive through African people wherever they are, regardless of what white folks is doing. We still gonna be cool, right? So it has nothing to do with them responding to white hegemonic and oppressive forces, right? So then you have to think about this idea of resilience theory, and then also think about resilience theory as it applies to African-American male theory, right? Because they say that they embrace resilience theory, right? So we know that elements of African-American male theory are rooted and steeped in this idea of resilience theory. Who can provide me with a definition or conceptual understanding of resilience theory? No one? So what is resilience? What does it mean to be resilient? Having to overcome and get tough and hard, yes. So having to overcome hard times, having to overcome hardship, right? So resilience is a theory that is rooted in the idea that the people who are the subject of the theory, in this case, Black boys and Black men, right? They're able to overcome hardships, right? So Bush and Bush are saying that no, it's not, coolness is not a response to white supremacist forces, right? It's more so rooted in their resilience. Their resiliency is what makes them cool and makes them embody and take on these cool postures. It has nothing to do with them responding to white oppression or white domination. Is there any other questions or comments around this, this idea of cool or anything within this reading here as it pertains to African-American male theory? All right. So we'll move forward. We're looking at, am I a man and can I be young? Are the questions that are posed through these two readings. So looking at the first one, what is the driving question that informs the thesis of the text, am I a man? And if you think about it, right, like the question is rooted in the title of the essay, right? So that shouldn't be too hard to understand. Discuss the three factors scholars historically and more recently argue are the cause of the collective emasculation of Black men, and what interventions does Black feminist author Bell Hooks contribute to this discourse? And when you hear discourse, right, it's just a conversation. You could replace conversation with discourse. It means the same thing. Discuss the role of the Black Power movement in inciting particular depiction of Black manhood. What's the author's position on the acceptability of all Black male institutions? So does anyone want to try to answer the questions? Anyone have questions for me about the inquiries or want to engage in a conversation around these inquiries?
I don't know if I can ask this, but I'm going to. Can you just kind of like, not answer the question, or I guess like kind of walk me through the last question, discuss the role of Black Power movement? Okay. So in the article, right, so I can just pull accurate quotes, 1 second. But in the article, it posits that the Black Power movement, it manifests like this very particular type of manhood, right? And gave us a manhood in a certain iteration, right? And so, because think about the Black Power movement, right? We have the Black Panthers. We have individuals like Malcolm X, who's like the godfather, if you will, of the Black Power movement. It gave the image and the aesthetic of these gun carrying, not taking no shit, not gonna back down, not gonna turn the other cheek versions of manhood, right? And that version of manhood kind of created a rupture in the way that the overall broader world looked at Black men, as well as the way that Black men looked at themselves, right? And it kind of shifted to where Black men started identifying manhood with individuals like Huey P. Newton, individuals like Bunchy Carter, individuals like Malcolm X. Those were the embodiment of manhood, right? Whereas before, you know, individuals like Martin Luther King and the likes of the civil rights movements, they didn't really feel that they embodied this depiction of manhood because, well, excuse me, civil rights was nonviolent, right? Civil rights was turn the other cheek, right? So when the Black Power era came in, we're not riding with that shit no more, right? Like you hit me, I'm gonna hit you back. And this is the type of manhood that the world respected. And this is the type of manhood that kind of gave Black men a platform globally. So it not only changed the way that the world looked at Black manhood, but it changed the way that Black men looked at themselves. Does that kind of answer your question, Alexandra? Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Like, y'all, this is what, like, how she asked that question. This is the point of what we're doing. So don't be afraid to ask questions. This is why I'm dedicating my time to do this. So if you have questions, now is a good time to ask them. Anyone else? I'm sorry, go ahead.
The three factors scholars historically, are those the three social movements? Or is that something else?
That's something else. Let me see.
Okay. Because I took a lot of notes on the social movements because there were
yeah, there are like 5 social movements, right?
Yeah.
But there's 3 factors, and I'm gonna get to you right here. One second, let me try the system. Okay, so the first one is enslavement, right? Because this caused a situation to where African men could not protect themselves or their families, right? And then it's the idea of the matriarchal system within the Black communities and within the Black household, and the idea of the overpowering Black woman that seeks to emasculate Black men, and then also the economic oppression. That's the final factor that seeks to emasculate Black men. Does that sound familiar for you, Ryan?
Yeah, I remember talking about it too when you were teaching about it.
Yeah, but you're right. There are those the social movements. I didn't get into that in the question here. So just think about those factors though. Okay. And then so if we're going to take that a little bit further, because within those within the factors that cause the emasculation, right? We're asking what intervention does Bell Hooks make within this conversation? And remember, this is where Hooks is arguing that Black men never really seen all Black women as part of their community, right? They only identify the Black women from their family or the Black women from their ethnic group as part of their community, right? So this is the intervention that's made by Bell Hooks within this conversation of not being able to protect themselves or their families as being an emasculating phenomenon. Bell Hooks' argument is like, nah, that's not an emasculating phenomenon, because the Black men who were enslaved didn't view all Black women as part of that community. Only those who were actually part of their ethnic group or actually part of their nuclear family as those who should be protected. So that's the intervention made by Bell Hooks. Does everybody understand that?
So basically, like these three factors would be what you call the cultural deficiencies or social challenges, and the Black Power movement is the response that would reinforce the African American male theory.
For Alexandra, so what Alexandra demonstrated right here is how you would use the framework to help answer your question. Alexandra, that's perfect.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding, like that's how you want us to go about the answering.
That's perfect. Yep.
Okay.
What she said, does that make sense? Because if you could grasp what she's just mentioned, then you would know how to use these frameworks to answer these questions. All right. So if there's no more questions about Am I a Man, I'll move on to the next Beyond Love reading. Y'all good with that?
Actually, can you repeat the last one you mentioned? I have enslavement, matriarchy, like powerful Black women. What was the last one?
So the three factors to the emasculation of Black men, right? So let me do this.
Said enslavement, matriarchal system, idea of overpowering Black women, and economic oppression.
Those are the three factors, right? So what I was speaking to is this portion here. What does feminist author Bell Hooks add to this discourse, right? So Bell Hooks is arguing that Black men, Africans who were in the enslaved population, right? They did not view all Black women as part of their community, right? They only view the Black women who were part of their family or part of their ethnic group, right? So for example, I'm on the plantation, Marquisha's on the plantation, Cherie's on the plantation, Amanda's on the plantation, right? Marquisha is a Khan, I'm a Khan. So I'm gonna view Marquisha as part of my kin group, right? But Cherie is Yoruba and Amanda is Hausa. So I don't view Amanda and Cherie as part of my ethnic group, only Marquisha, right? So my desire to protect my community is going to be situated to Marquisha alone. Although, although Amanda and Cherie are Black women, they are African women, I don't view them as part of my network, part of my community, because they're from separate ethnic groups, right? This is what Bell Hooks is arguing. So because of that reality, Bell Hooks argues, well, we cannot say that the inability to protect Black women emasculated Black men because they did not view all of the women on the plantation as part of their family. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's what I was articulating as far as the that last point. And then if you're asking about the role of the Black Power movement, right? So before the Black Power movement, according to the article, right, they did not, by and large, the broader society did not, by and large, view Black men as men, right? Because they didn't demonstrate the machismo, the masculinity that other groups demonstrated, right? It wasn't until groups like the Black Panthers came around and said, you know what, we'll pick up the gun too. It wasn't until individuals like Malcolm X came around and said the ballot or the bullet that the world started to view Black men as men, right? And because of not only the outside world viewing Black men as men, but Black men themselves begin to view themselves as men because of the works of the likes of Malcolm X and the works of the likes of the Black Panther Party. So that's what we're getting to in regards to how the Black Power movement, they created a particular depiction of Black manhood, right? Okay. Is there any
They
other?
basically created their own depiction of what Black manhood should be, kind of, with the Black Panther movement?
Yes, Markeisha, but I kind of did that because it's also in alignment with the dominant society, right? So a lot of the things that make the Black Panther Party perform manness, right, are in alignment with the way that white folks view manness, to put it bluntly, right? So that's why I kind of, it's like, kind of, because it's not really their own, right? Violence is part of being a man. So now we got guns, so now you look manly because you could enact violence with a gun, right? So that's why I kind of say it's not, it is their own, but it still falls under the umbrella of how Europeans think about manhood as well.
Got it.
Okay. All right. So if there's no other questions, I'll move on. Okay. So we're looking at can I be young? So one, I'm asking you, what is the thesis of this reading, right? But not only am I asking you what is the thesis of this reading, I'm asking you what are the thesis of the previous readings as well, because I want to do a comparative analysis between the thesis, right? So how does this thesis of Beyond Love contradict the arguments made in the previous reading? And we had a great amount of time dedicated to kind of teasing out this contradiction here. So you should be able to familiarize yourself with that and be able to speak to that. Also, why was the murder of Trayvon Martin such a point of passion for so many within the Black community? And what are the implications for young Black male innocence, right? And that, to me, is a core component of what the article is seeking to deal with. Does anyone want to answer this, or does anyone have questions for me as it pertains to this reading?
For the last part of that, why was the murder of Trayvon Martin such a point of passion? Was it because he was in the neighborhood he was supposed to be in and then just dressed like a regular kid, but then was targeted as portrayed as an adult, like in the media?
That is one of the concerns of the article, right? But far as the question, why is this a point of passion for the Black community? This is like strictly pulled from the actual reading itself. Let me see. So
wasn't it like we thought because like that could have been our own child, our own family member?
Yep. Exactly. And then so it also asks, what are the implications for young Black male innocence, right? And essentially, there is no idea of young Black male innocence because the article argues that they're not viewed as young, they're viewed as men already, and they're already viewed as guilty, right? So those are the implications for Black young male innocence as it pertains to Trayvon Martin, right? Trayvon Martin was already guilty just by walking down that street, by the way he was viewed by society, right? Any other questions?
I'm just curious, how would you say that you can tie this back to African American male theory?
Honestly, Alexandra, how you did with the previous one would really go well here too, right? Because the article is arguing that we are unable to be innocent, we're unable to be young. Those are all working through these deficit paradigms, right? Whereas the theory is positing there's brilliance within us naturally, right? So this probably would play out more so that the world is viewing us through these paradigms, and maybe situating African American male theory as a theory that could rescue us from being viewed from these paradigms. And I would even argue it's an so inside the community and external rescue as well, right? So not only the way that we look at ourselves within the Black community, but the way that the outside world could begin to look at us also.
Right, and that it's a continuing, thing, obviously, with modern day.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. Any other questions? All right. All right, so the last two, fuck your fantasies and gender norms, right? So this is dealing with the Mandingo fantasies and then the fuck your gender norms reading. So the first one, what is the thesis and method? So again, I put the how in parentheses, right? So how does the author concoct this thesis for the text, fear, and desire? Discuss the significance of the localities, right? And we spent a good time in the lecture going off of this also. So why does he mention being in Arkansas, being in Texas, and then being in California at the most ethnically diverse university in the nation? Why is that mentioned in the text? And how do these localities add to the argument that's being made by Bush? And then how does the Mandingo stereotype seek to dehumanize African men, right? And that's also talked about very explicitly within the article. Is there any questions, comments, or answers for this inquiry? All right.
Well, I have a quick question about it. So basically when it's talking about like all the diversity places that he was at and how it still, was it just like no matter how diverse it still is going to be a point of topic?
Yep, absolutely.
Basically.
So like Arkansas, deep down south, right? You're already assuming that's a racist locality. Right. Texas, still down south. You're gonna kind of assume that there are gonna be elements of racism there. More Black folks than probably Arkansas, but you're still gonna assume that there's gonna be racism. California is diverse, it's progressive, right? You're not gonna assume that there's gonna be racism there, but yet and behold, there's still racism there. So absolutely, Markeisha, this is exactly what he's trying to add to the argument, right? No matter where you're at from a spatial standpoint, right? Or where you're at from a standpoint of being in the academy, somewhere that's supposed to be of high theory, of intelligence and things like that, you could still be reduced to this stereotype.
Professor,
yes.
Would they like more microaggression?
Yeah, I would think, Armani, not only microaggression, but macroaggressions also, right? Like, I wouldn't consider like the invasion of my personal space a microaggression, like touching my beard and shit. That to me, that's a macroaggression. That's like the equivalent of somebody touching your hair. You know what I mean? Being called a Chippendale dancer, I would also say that's a macroaggression, not a microaggression. But you're right. There are elements of that there as well, right?
Okay.
Any other questions? All right. So we're moving into the Fuck Your Gender Norms article. So what is the thesis of this text, right? Actually, the thesis is kind of bleeds into the next question, right? How does colonialism disrupt and continues to disrupt the gendered functioning of Igbo society? So really, the thesis is how colonialism has disrupted the gendered functioning of the societies, right? But then I would like to know, how did colonialism do that? And how are Igbo men complicit in maintaining colonial understandings of gender? and then discuss how pre-colonial understandings of gender or the lack thereof empower Igbo women. Is there questions, comments, concerns about this reading here?
You said it interrupted the gender norms?
Yes, so, and I think too, this part right here, the lack thereof, I don't want to kind of gloss over that fact, because I think if you're reading the article closely, the article is arguing that in pre-colonial West Africa and Igbo society in particular, right, there was no gender norms. Colonialism came in and set up these gender norms, right? So that's why I said the lack thereof, because really they didn't have one until Europeans came in and established these type of gender roles, right? Not to say they didn't have gender, but the roles assigned to the gender was not a thing. So really, how did they do it is they assigned the gender roles, right? And then how it continues is the way that the Igbo men remain complicit in maintaining these roles, right? Because the article argues that the men are benefiting from being placed in power, and they seek to maintain them because they don't want to give up that perceived element of power that they got.
So to be clear, is it kind of like a contrast of pre-colonial understanding? Okay.
Yep, it's a comparative, right? So how did they think about gender prior to European invasion? And now that European invasion has happened, how are they thinking about gender? So yes, absolutely. It's a comparative analysis, pre-colonialism, post-colonialism as it pertains to gender.
And that's tying into like right now, right? As far as how we see it, or just specifically staying within the text of what it said?
So Cherie, if you were to incorporate that into your answer, you wouldn't be wrong for doing that, right? You just want to make sure that you're answering the question in its entirety. So like, for example, if you start to go into how this plays out contemporarily, right? But you leave out the fact of how women are being empowered, then you're going to lose points for that, right? So for me, I would want you to first and foremost address all the questions in the question before you start to add in other type of theories and thoughts. Not saying that you can't, but you want to just make sure that you're answering these questions in their entirety before you begin to branch out.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
When you were talking about empowering women, the Igbo women, were you talking about like before the colonialism happened, because they were like, I don't know, like doing more and stuff like that? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they were able to sit in places of power. They were able to maintain the family's riches by maintaining the last name of the family, right? They're able to serve as leaders of the market, trading women and things of that nature. All that was happening prior to colonialism. And then once colonialism came in, all that ceased. So it kind of usurped some of their power.
Could this text be, can you connect it to the concept of manhood text, or
yeah,
is it? Okay.
That's a good question, Ryan, because seemingly, right, like the theory is strictly predicated to men. But for me, to be honest with you, Ryan, I use this theory all the time, and I always expand it to include women and all African people. And I wouldn't be mad if you did the same within this context. Even if you said something like, while African-American male theory is specified to Black men, this theory can be applied to Black women as it speaks to their intelligence and capacity for brilliance. By they're able to run the market societies, they're able to have the dancing women's revolt, right? So these are ways that you could say, you could use the theory to speak to the agency of the Igbo women. Does that make sense for you, Ryan?
Yeah.
And then you could also do the reversal of that, kind of like Alexandra did, stating that, you know, European colonialism was operating from these deficit paradigms and thinkings, whereas prior to European invasion, the thinking was more aligned with African-American male theory. That's another way you could kind of go about situating the framework within the reading. But that's a very good question, though. Anyone else? Okay, so a couple things. What causes people to lose points historically, right, is not answering the question completely. So like I said, if we're using the first question, who are African people? So let's just say that you state how old African people are, but you don't name two significant, or you just name one significant individual and not two, right? You're gonna lose points because you're not answering the question in its entirety, right? So make sure you take the time and read the entire question, and you're answering every component of that question. And then two, why people lose points is not engaging the theoretical framework. So you want to make sure for all three of your answers, as some way, you're engaging the theory, and you're making sure that you're answering every component of that question to receive full points. People do well on the test, but why people lose points for those two reasons. So I just want to make sure that those don't trip you up. Also, I'm giving it to you no later than Friday. I would not wait to the last minute to do this test, right? That's also going to make it harder for you. If you have the time to kind of sparse it out, do so. Even if you take like one question a day, right? You do one question on Friday, one question on Saturday, one question on Sunday, then you're done and it's not overwhelming. But if you wait till Monday to get that shit in, it's going to be stressful. So take the time that's given to you to make it easier on yourself. Any other questions?
I might have missed it, but is it a time test? Like, do we have a?
You got the weekend. You got them 3 days.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Will we still meet on Monday for class, or
It's
is
spring break.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Got it.
So you just submit that and then just enjoy your break, and we'll reconvene. So what I'll do is Thursday of spring break. I hate to do that to y'all. What I'll probably do is assign a video. We'll try to give you a video, so that way you're not reading on your break. I don't want to fuck up the weekend of your break by giving you homework. So I'll try to provide you like a video, something to watch, just so we can have a conversation as we go into the remainder of the semester. Remember also, your journals will be due that Monday as well. So there will be a section on Google Classroom to submit the journals as well as the midterm. And then that's it. Any other questions? We still have a good 20 minutes. I want to make sure that you all feel prepared going in. Actually, let me do this. How do you feel going into the midterm? Do you feel prepared?
Yeah, I feel prepared.
Okay. Dominic said, I believe so.
Yeah, I feel prepared.
Okay, Luis, cool. Catherine, I'm not sure. Because Catherine asked, I thought spring break started on the 28th. I want to say it's the following week. Yeah, because I have my major exam scheduled that week, and I have them scheduled the week of spring break, so we should be cool.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
So you're gonna release the midterm this Friday or next Friday?
This Friday.
Okay, our spring break is from the 28th to the 3rd. So our spring break, we still have next week of school.
School, okay. Fuck that up. Thank you. Yeah, you're right. Well, we'll roll with it. I'll roll that out, and then I'll think of something to do for next week. We'll probably just like I said, I'll assign a video to watch, and then we'll go from there. At least that way you don't have to worry about anything for your spring break. My apologies. I thought I was more aligned with that, but what good side for me, at least, that gives me another week to prepare for my test. But what you guys could do, you have a little bit more time to, well, we'll still do what we're doing. And then like I said, I'll sign a video to kind of fill that next week and call it, we'll go from there. All right.
I have a question regarding the journals.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been like reading and then like taking notes of the reading. Could that be considered of the journal, or do I have to put the thesis in there as well?
So I'm looking for those 4 components. I'm looking for the thesis, I'm looking for the analysis, I'm looking for the contemporary analysis. So how does it fit to what's going on in the world today? And then the questions that you may have. So the other stuff is cool, right? But those 4 components is what I'm looking for.
Okay.
So it would be the questions that you access during class.
No, so I'm sorry, say it again.
It would be the questions that you access during class that you would post in the chat for us.
No. So those are, although I pull from the journal sometimes, but those are separate, right? Those should be like when you're reading the article, you should read it and like, okay, boom, this is the thesis of this reading. This is the analysis of the reading. This is the contemporary analysis of the reading. And these are the questions I have about the reading. That's what should make up your journal. Does that make sense more, Armani?
Yes.
Okay. So that's what I'm looking for the journal. I don't care how long it is, but long as you have those 4 components will give you a full journal entry. It could be like literally 4 bullet points. Boop, 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 boop. That's cool with me. I just need those 4 components for you to get full points.
So it's thesis, analysis, and then I forgot there was one more.
Thesis, analysis, contemporary analysis, and then your questions. On the syllabus, under the journal portion on the syllabus, it has that breakdown on there. You could always refer back to that. Looking at the question that Emily posted in the chat, no, they are recorded on YouTube, the recorded lectures, but they're on the Google Classroom site. And I'll pull it up so you can see where to locate those. They don't get deleted after time. That's why I posted them on the Google Classroom site, so that way you could still have them there. And I'll show you where to go to locate those. Because what you could do to prepare for yourself is see the questions that are posed on the study guide, and then go back and watch the lecture that is accompanied to that reading, and then you'll probably get those answers from there. Let me see. So here's a Google Classroom site. You'll go to this class under coursework, and you see here it says course lectures, course lectures, and then they're all located here. And I believe I should have, okay, I thought it had the the title of each one, but it doesn't. So that's where you would locate the lectures if you need those. And like I said, you could also answer the questions or look at the questions, go back and watch the lectures to get your answers, and then that'll help you prepare for the midterm as well. Or you could just reread the article, right? But looking for the questions that are posed in the study guide, or reread your journals, looking for the questions that are posed in the study guide. All those should prepare you for the midterm. If by and large, right, if you could answer the questions that are on the study guide, you will have no problems with the midterm. If you have questions from now until the midterm, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I can set up a Zoom conversation with you. I can answer them via email or text, whatever works best. This is all to get you all prepared. If you feel like you still have questions, you're more than welcome to jump into Wednesday's meeting. We'll be doing the same thing with Wednesday's group, but if you just kind of want a refresher, you could always do that. Maybe beneficial also because I'm assuming that group B won't have the same questions as group A, and that may give you a more comprehensive understanding of the material, but it's totally up to you. Any other questions, comments, or concerns you all have for me?
We're just going to be answering 3.
I'm sorry, go ahead, say it again, Armani.
For the essay questions, we're just going to be answering 3 out of the 5 you give us. Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Lizeth, is it Lizeth? Did you have a question?
Yes. Do you want the 3 questions in the same document or different document each one?
Yes, please put them in one PDF document. Don't make me do extra work by having to open up all these other attachments. Put it in one document, submit one file for your answers. Same for the journals. Have your journals, please have them typed out, so that way you can submit one PDF with all the journal entries in it. If you have done the journal separately already, right? Copy and paste them motherfuckers and put it on one document for me, so that way I just have one document to open, so I'm not going through and looking for all these different attachments. Okay,
so one document for the midterm and for the
journal.
Yes, so one for all of them.
Yes. Well,
Okay, thank
let me just make sure I'm clear. One document to submit for your midterm, boom. One separate document to submit for your journal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question. Any other questions? All right, y'all. We'll call it a day then. Be healthy, be wealthy, be wise, get your exercise, vitamin D, and water. Again, if something pops up, right, holler at me or just jump into Wednesday's conversation, whatever works best for you. And make sure that you feel prepared going into the weekend. All right. Peace, y'all.
See you,
Thank you.
Professor.
All right, Luis. All right, Marquisha. All right, Shree. Everybody have a good one. All right, Ishmael. All right, Ryan. All right, Emily. Lanisha, you good?